Right on. So we are continuing our series called Lookup. It's a series through the book of Colossians. Colossians is a letter written by the Apostle Paul to Christians in the ancient Roman city of Colossae, which is sort of southwestern-ish modern-day Turkey. Okay? And the whole idea of the series is saying we spend a lot of our lives right here with our phones or our keyboards or our knitting. Yes, Allison, our knitting. You know, whatever it happens to be. Maybe crocheting, if that's got a cool cross stitch, something that go in a frame on the wall, that would be good too. But we have all these things that are immediately in front of us, that demand our attention, that call for our attention, that maybe usurp our attention, right? Even though we know it needs to be going other places. And everything is lived kind of right here. Even when we're out walking in the area of outstanding natural beauty of the Surrey Hills, our eyes are often just on our feet rather than looking up and catching a view. And so we want to catch a view of the big picture. And the first sort of chapters of Colossians, Paul is helping his first readers know about the big picture of who Jesus is and what he has accomplished. That Jesus is God, he's died on a cross for sin, he's risen again on the third day, and has ascended into heaven as sort of King of Kings and Lord of Lords, which is kind of a big claim. And all of those are bold claims. As we carry on in chapter 3 and in, principally chapter 3, it's a lot of practical kind of stuff rooted in this context of who Jesus is and all he's accomplished. Now, the Colossians were actual people of an actual time and an actual place, just like we are here. And if somebody was writing a letter to the believers in Dorking, maybe they would make reference to things we understood, particularly if it was a letter today. Perhaps the writer of the letter would make reference to the pending Platinum Jubilee. Maybe would make reference to chickens or something like that, you know? Something that's sort of contextually local, that we would go, oh yeah, I get that. Maybe something about road cyclists. You know, I don't know. But something that's contextual that makes sense to us that we clock and go, oh yeah, I get what you're talking about. So the Colossae was a city in the Roman Empire. Now, the Roman Empire grew and expanded and obviously was impactful because we still talk about it today. So here's what would happen, and I'm not trying to impress you with my Latin and Greek because I actually don't know as much as I'm going to infer that I do. But what I want to do in using these Latin and Greek phrases is go, this is grounded in actual time and place. Right? And the stuff we talk about even 2,000 years ago as Christians is actually grounded in historical time and place and context. So, as the Roman Empire expanded, the Roman army would go out and do its thing, which usually meant destroying another army. Right? If you've ever seen like the film Gladiator, no spoilers, all right, no promise. All right, the opening scene is this, phenomenal piece of cinematic art, right? Where the Roman army goes out and battles the Germanic armies and they win. And of course, that's not a spoiler. That's, come on, you know? All right? And at the end of the battle, not the end of the film, end of the battle, everyone shouts, Roma Victor, right? And that was like the victory cry. Rome has won. Roma Victor. After Rome would win a battle, they would send, the Greek word at that time was an apostolos, a sent one. And the English word is apostle, right? And that apostle would go into that area, that territory whose army had just been defeated, and declare the euangelion, Greek word for the good news. Good news, guys! Roma Victor. Good news! Rome's won. Good news! Caesar is Lord. And now the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, extends to this place. You're going to have to pay some taxes, but the peace of Rome extends to this place. And all of the blessings of the peace of Rome can be yours. All of the commerce, all of the military defense, all of the technology and education, the peace and the glory of Rome now extends to this place. Aren't you lucky? Right? That's kind of the cultural context. Now that helps us make sense a little bit of what Jesus' first disciples and apostles went out and did. They went out, these sent ones, went out and say, Christus Victor. Christ has won a battle. Well, what battle was that? Well, it was the battle against our condemnation that came from the law, our prosecution, which came from the accuser, which is another way of referring to Satan or whatever, right? And so, through this battle, we've been liberated from condemnation and accusation, and in Jesus' resurrection, death does not have the final word, but we have hope as Christians that a spiritual heaven when we die isn't the end goal. Actually, bodily resurrection like Jesus's is. And one day we look forward to living in the body on an earth where there's no more sin or death or mourning or crying or pain or COVID or flu or cancer or anything else like that, where we live in harmony with God, with each other, and with all of creation, just the way we know it ought to be, but isn't. Right? So, Christus Victor. Christ has won. Right? Christ is Lord. Jesus is Lord. And now the peace of Christ, the Pax Christus, the peace of Christ extends here to this place, if you'll have it. Okay? That's the context within which we understand what Paul's going to write to the Colossians next. She's like, Peter, aren't you done? That's probably enough, don't you think? Okay. Look, just getting going, guys. It'll be like an hour more. It's fine. Trust me. You'll love. Okay, verse 15 of chapter 3. Paul writes to these Colossians, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you are called to peace, and be thankful. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Okay, so we're just going to take this kind of verse by verse as we go. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. Now, on the one hand, that's Christ has won a victory. He's won the victory, the decisive victory. So you have peace with God, and you can have peace with each other. You'll remember, perhaps those of you who were here last week, if you weren't, you can tune in on Facebook and grab it. But this whole thing about clothing ourselves with kindness, compassion, humility, gentleness, patience, forgiving one another. Because at the end of the day, that's the victory that Christ has secured, this victory of forgiveness. We all raise our hands and say, I'm not perfect, which is like the normal way people would say the Christian thing, which is everyone sins. Right? And he's secured forgiveness. And in that forgiveness, there's peace. We don't owe God the way we used to. Neither does he owe us judgment. Rather, we have peace and reconciliation. And so this, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. Part of that is, dude, chill out. It's cool. Your heart doesn't have to be so anxious. Jesus has won. It's going to be okay. It's not okay right now. It's going to be okay. Chill out. It's cool. That's one aspect of let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. The other side, the Greek word for rule here is literally kind of be the umpire. If you, what do you call officials in cricket? Are they umpires? Yeah. Okay, right. Yeah, baseball, it's an umpire as well. All right. So the umpire makes the judgment call in a particular situation and also judges according to the rules. Well, Jesus has established new rules. Through faith in him, we are forgiven, we are reconciled, everything is cool. We're at peace with God and peace with each other should we decide to turn from our sin and reach out and hold on to that forgiveness and choose to follow Jesus. That's the new kind of rule. And so in that way, we have peace with God. And in that way, we also have peace with each other. Just like we receive forgiveness from God, we extend forgiveness to one another. That's the sort of guiding principle. And so that's the umpire in our hearts. Because in my heart, I might feel a lot of different things. We talked about last week having a gut of mercy. I don't always necessarily have a gut of mercy. But if the umpire in my heart, right, is, no, forgive. Just like Jesus lost some stuff in order to give forgiveness and some stuff, I might have to lose some stuff in order to extend forgiveness to others. That's the umpire in my heart. Let the peace of Christ not only keep me from being anxious and say, dude, chill out, it's going to be fine. It might not be fine yet, but it's going to be fine. Let that chill me out. And also, from the forgiveness I received from God, let that be the umpire in my heart so that I can extend forgiveness to others. Because until resurrection, like this side of resurrection, we're going to offend one another. Like it's just going to happen. So let that peace of Christ be the umpire in my heart and in your hearts. Since as members of one body, you are called to peace. And this is specifically talking to Christians. Like, dude, Christians, if you've been forgiven by God, you really need to be forgiving to one another. It's a bit hypocritical. There's really not a whole lot of space for that. You're one people. And we've talked in previous weeks about this one people that God is making. We have a different sort of culture, right? So there's a sense where, and yeah, I'm a Yank, and you guys are Brits, and maybe there's some folks from some other places. Aussie. Wasn't that terrible? Should I do it again? All right, no, that's a bad idea. All right? But we have all of our different cultural distinctions, but God says, there's a new culture I'm forming. The clothing of that culture isn't, denim and button-up shirts or skirts or saris or, whatever else. The clothing of the culture is really forgiveness and patience, right? So we're called to peace with that forgiveness and patience and be thankful. Ooh, be thankful. It's kind of just lobbed in there, doesn't it? Thankfulness is kind of a rough one because there's so many things this side of resurrection to be irritated about. And all the imperfections of this side of resurrection, there will always be something to grumble about. There will always be something to moan about. There will always be something to be rightfully upset about. But man, what a miserable way to live. That's like, yeah, God's like, grieve the things that are worth grieving and grieve with those who grieve. And yeah, God says, I grieve. But also be thankful. To not be thankful is to actually discredit God for all of the good things that he has given us and all of the mercy that we do experience this side of resurrection when actually we deserve justice rather than mercy. So be thankful. Have an attitude of gratitude. Oh my gosh. You just had to say it to mock it to get it out of the way. All right? All right. Now, carrying on verse 16, let the message of Christ dwell among you. Now all right, I'm going to get my nerd on again. All right, so the Greek word behind message is this word logos. And logos is a really flexible Greek word. It means a lot of things. You might think of the word blue in English. It can mean a lot of different things. It can be a color. It can be a mood that you're in. It can, but logos is a very sort of flexible word, and it can mean literally word, message, communication, logic, reason, rationale, way of thinking. I mean, there are a lot of sort of ways that in English we would try to describe the breadth of meaning that logos has. Typically, we translate this, let the message of Christ, the communication that Jesus is Lord, that he's died on the cross and risen again, Christus Victor, he's ascended into heaven, Christus Victor, the peace of Christ now can rule and reign because Jesus is Lord, right? There's that message, but there's also this notion of the logic of Christ. See, we have a Western logic here. We think like Westerners, people from North and West Europe who are very influenced by the Enlightenment. We have a way of thinking that is very culturally bound up. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying it's a thing. We have a cultural way of thinking. And so what we're hearing here is actually this new people that God is creating in Christ have a different way of thinking. We have a different logic that underpins the way we process information and experiences and then respond to them. And that logic is most keenly understood in Jesus. This notion of loving, proactive self-sacrifice for others' well-being that creates peace in relationships and protects peace in relationships. For me to forgive you or for you to forgive me is going to require loss. Forgiveness always requires the endurance of personal loss. You accept the dishonor or the shame or the pain or the financial loss or whatever that someone else has inflicted upon you, and you have foregone justice. You owe me, pal. In an aim of forgiveness. And so the logic of Christ is saying, ooh, this is going to be full of pain and full of shame, because remember, the cross was painful, yes, but mostly it was shameful. But in order to create peace, maintain peace with each other and be this new sort of people, right, that logic has to underpin, I'm prepared to endure loss in order to bless another. And when we all have that disposition, blessing just spills out. And what we find is, though we have lost in forgiveness, that loss is returned back in blessing tenfold. And we're knit together as a community. And the kind of peace that we know we want, and we know should be, begins to be realized, however imperfectly. But let the logic of Christ dwell among you as you teach and admonish one another. Because we always have those conversations, don't we? Like, who calls anyone anymore, really? All right? I was going to say, you call somebody and you have a little phone conversation. Like, yeah, you get the phone cord and you sneak into the closet, right, and close it so mom and dad can't hear you. Do you remember that? Okay, I'm like, yeah. No, you text or, you're on your Snap Trash. And, yeah, I know you like that. Mary's like, Dad, that's not as clever as you think it is. It's really not funny. It's not, I know, but they all laugh, so you need to up your sense of humor. It is, you're laughing now. Awesome. What's great is I think the camera just catches your humiliation right now. I'm joking, I'm joking. But in all seriousness, we have these conversations. You wouldn't believe what happened to me today. And as we have our exchanges, is the underpinning logic that informs our thinking and our sharing with one another, formed by who Jesus is and everything he's accomplished for us. But then it gets weird. And the Bible does that sometimes, and that's okay. The Bible can get weird. That's why it's my job to try to help us all understand it. And there can be times when you can go, actually, Peter, here's something else. I go, oh, thank you for helping me understand it. See, we help each other. All right? So, as you teach and admonish one another, in other words, as you give each other advice about how to live in different situations, have the logic of Christ underpinning your thinking. But then he goes on, with all wisdom, through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. Wait, hold on. So now you're telling me we've got to, life is a musical. Cool. Fantastic. And we're going to be at the pub. You're going to tell me about a situation. I'm going to bust into song. Actually, a little bit of choreographed dance as well. It'll be incredible. That's not what the Bible's instructing us to do. Because we don't sing in pubs, you fool. Oh, time out. Yeah, we do. I went to watch one of the England matches in the Euros, and me and a buddy went to a pub, and what happened there? What happened? Watching the game, 20-some-year-old lads, there were 9 German bombers in the air. There were 9 German bombers in the air. I was like, oh, wow. you're nowhere near that event. You have no, maybe your granddad, served, or something like that. Maybe you got a family member, but you are so far removed from that victory. And the RAF from England won the war. Yeah, still singing songs about the victory. Right? And those songs that we sing influence our thinking, and they come out in our speaking. That's why we do weird things like sing praise songs. Because it helps truth sink from our heads into our hearts and then becomes part of our reflex when we're discussing life with one another. Most old hymns are set to pub tunes. And so I just want to encourage us, coming on Sunday morning and singing songs, a bit weird. But actually it's not. It might just be that the logic of what we're singing about is foreign to you and to me. Because we think like secular Westerners, really. Our songs teach us to think like secular Westerners. Our educational system teaches us to think like secular Westerners. And here, God is calling us to think like Jesus people. To have self-sacrificial blessing and forgiveness be our instinct. To when we're talking to one another about life, letting the lordship of Christ and the peace of his kingship extend into our lives so we can encourage one another and give each other sound advice as to how to live out the logic of Jesus in the world. And as we do that, peace proliferates. That was really cool. 2 P's right in a row. I made it up just then. But it does. The world becomes a little bit of a better place, and we get a foretaste, this side of resurrection, of what life on the other side of resurrection will be like. We grow in our love for Jesus. We grow in our love for each other. And blessing abounds. See, I got the B's in there that time. All right. So, what we're about to do next, we're going to have a time where we're going to sing, and then we're going to have confession. Confession, it just means admitting the truth. Sometimes confession is positive. I believe in God the Father, maker of heaven and earth. That's a confession. Sometimes it's like, here's the truth, I screwed up, and this is how. Right? What we're going to do is confess to God. And all we're doing is saying, God, this is how I screwed up this week. Or maybe this is how I screwed up in my life. And the thing of it is, the logic of Christ underpins that experience. Are you coming to a God who say, all right, now here's the penalty. You got to pay for it. And after you've paid enough, then we'll let it go. The logic of Christ is, it's been paid for. Turn away. Grab onto me. Follow me. You're forgiven. Let's go. Let's do this. It's a very different context within which to admit you've really messed up. All right? So I'd like to invite the band, I suppose we'll call it, the worship team up to lead us in some sung worship as we prepare for